Silence on this planet was not empty. It pressed inward. It crept into the joints of the suit, into the seals behind the ears, into the small, involuntary pauses between breaths where the mind usually rested. Here, even those pauses felt watched. The sky above was a bruised gradient of dying light violet bleeding into rust. Clouds stretched thin like scars that never healed properly. Nothing moved. No wind, no birds. No machines humming in the distance. Just the sound of a man breathing inside a suit that had outlived its manufacturer by 2 centuries. Commander Elias. Rook stood at the edge of the obsidian plateau and felt the weight of the planet. Leaning back at him, he had been alone for 1,312 days. The numbers still mattered to him. They were proof that time was moving, that his mind had not dissolved into the static haze that claimed so many long-term isolation survivors. He kept the count carved into the inside of his wrist guard, with a laser etched one thin line for each week. At some point the lines had stopped looking like time and started looking like scars. Below the plateau, the alien plains stretched endlessly, a landscape of black crystalline stone fractured by veins of faint bioluminescence. The ground pulsed slowly, like something sleeping, or something pretending to be. This was not the planet he was meant to die on. Earth's evacuation models had never included this star system. The charts marked it as unsuitable for human cognition, a phrase that sounded clinical until you stood here and felt your thoughts slowing, stretching, echoing back at you with unfamiliar weight. The first explorers had named the world Theravi, then promptly classified it and erased most of the data. That should have been warning enough. Elias adjusted the rifle. On his back out of habit, though he hadn't fired a round in over a year, there was nothing to shoot, nothing that bled. The danger here did not charge or roar. It waited. It listened. It learned his internal HUD, flickered power at 31%, oxygen stable, neural integrity holding. The last metric always made him uncomfortable. You could measure the mind now, or at least pretend to. He took a step forward. Oots grinding against crystal that rang softly, like distant bells underwater. The sound traveled farther than it should have, echoing across the plain, bouncing off invisible angles in the terrain. The planet answered his presence, the way a cathedral answers a whisper. This was where the signal had come from, 3 days earlier. While he was cataloging yet another dead relay tower, his receiver had spiked. Not the chaotic noise he'd learned to ignore this had. Structure, rhythm, intent. A repeating pulse embedded with harmonic layers, too precise to be natural. Too old to be human, and buried inside it, faint but unmistakable, was a human linguistic pattern. A voice, not spoken aloud, encoded, preserved, waiting. Elias had stared at the waveform for hours, afraid that if he moved too quickly, it would vanish like everything else had. He had replayed it until his hands shook, until his heart forgot how to beat normally. After more than 3 years of hearing only his own thoughts, the idea that something had reached out across this dead world felt almost violent. The signal originated, beneath the plateau, from a structure that should not exist. He descended slowly, following the path his drones had mapped careful steps, measured breathing, mind anchored to procedure. The slope led into a natural fissure, the stone walls closing around him. Light dimming until the suit's lamps took over. The bioluminescent veins brightened here, pulsing brighter as he passed. Responding to his movement in a way that felt disturbingly aware, he tried not to think about that. The fissure widened suddenly. Opening into a vast subterranean chamber, Elias stopped. The structure rose from the cavern floor, like a monument carved by gods who had grown tired of symmetry. Smooth, curved surfaces intersected with impossible angles, materials shifting in color depending on where he stood. It was not metal, not stone. Something in between, a composite grown rather than built. The surface shimmered faintly, responding to his suit lights, revealing layers beneath layers beneath layers, like a living archive. Human architecture screamed its purpose. Doors looked like doors. Corridors wanted to be walked. This did not. And yet, it felt familiar. "That's not possible," Elias whispered, his voice sounding fragile in the vast space. His HUD struggled to render the structure properly. Edges blurred, reasserted themselves, then softened again. Depth perception warped slightly, enough to trigger a low-level nausea warning. He forced himself to breathe through it. This was not alien in the way he expected. It was intentional. As he approached, markings emerged along the surface glyphs, etched shallowly, glowing faintly. They were not decorative. They were informational. Mathematical relationships expressed visually. Fractal sequences nested inside symbolic forms and woven through them like a signature pressed into clay. With something unmistakably human. Handwriting, Elias reached out before he realized. He was moving. His glove hovered centimeters from the surface, fingers trembling. Every briefing he'd ever attended screamed in his head, asterisk, asterisk, do not initiate physical contact with unknown xenostructures. Observe only. Record. Retreat. Asterisk, asterisk, but the structure was already reacting to him. The surface brightened beneath his hand. Warmth bleeding through the glove. His HUD exploded with data energy readings spiking, systems attempting to interface with no protocol to follow. The structure hummed, not audibly, but in a way that vibrated through his bones. Then the wall opened, not with a sound, but with a sensation like a held breath finally released. A passage unfolded seamlessly, revealing an interior bathed in soft amber light. The air inside shimmered, dense with particulate matter that moved slowly, lazily, like dust suspended in liquid. Elias stood frozen at the threshold, heart pounding so hard he could hear it over the suit's dampeners. "Okay," he murmured, the word meaningless but necessary. "Okay." He crossed the threshold. The interior atmosphere enveloped him instantly. The suit's sensors flared, oxygen composition adjusting, pressure stabilizing, toxins absent. The air was safe. Not just survivable, optimized. Tuned to human respiration with unsettling precision. The corridor curved gently. Walls alive with shifting imagery. As Elias walked, scenes emerged, ghost-like projections blooming from the walls, then dissolving. Human figures in lab coats. Children laughing in zero-gravity habitats. A blue planet seen from orbit, whole and unbroken Earth. His breath caught. "This is a record," he whispered. "A memory." The corridor opened into a vast chamber. At its center stood a circular platform. Raised slightly from the floor, surrounded by translucent columns that pulsed with data streams too dense to parse. And on that platform, Ela stopped breathing. She stood perfectly still, suspended within a cocoon of shimmering energy. Humanoid, but undeniably alien. Taller than any human woman, her form elongated and elegant, skin like polished obsidian threaded with veins of soft silver light. Her features were sharp, yet symmetrical. Eyes closed, expression serene in a way that felt ancient. An elaborate crown-like structure arced from her temples, organic and luminous. Pulsing in time with the structure itself, the alien queen. Even after centuries of myth, distorted recordings, and forbidden archives. There was no mistaking her. Every warning humanity had ever recorded condensed into a single, impossible presence. They had called her many names across the fragmented history as the architect, the ender, the mirror of extinction. But the one that survived longest, whispered even as civilizations burned, was simpler. Queen Elias felt his knees weaken. He had studied the old transmissions during his training. The ones officially labeled psychological hazard. The encounters never ended the same way twice, but they always ended badly. Entire colonies gone silent after first contact. Explorers returning changed if they returned at all. The queen did not conquer with fleets or weapons. She rewrote, and now she stood before him, dormant, vulnerable, beautiful in a way that hurt to look at for too long. His HUD screamed warnings, neural interference detected. Cognition drift increasing, but he ignored them. His gaze was locked on her face, on the subtle movements beneath her skin that suggested thought even in stasis. The signal. The voice. It hadn't been human. Reaching out, it had been her. A sudden realization settled heavily in his chest. The structure was not a prison, it was a sanctuary. Footsteps echoed behind him. Elias spun. Rifle coming up instinctively, then froze. The figure emerging from the shadows was human, older, thinner, eyes reflecting the amber light with a sharpness born of survival rather than hope. His suit was patched and mismatched, older even than Ilias's, its insignia long since scratched away. "You found her?" the man said softly. His voice was real, not a recording. Not a hallucination? Ilias's mind reeled. "Impossible," he whispered. "There were no other survivors." The man smiled sadly. "That's what she wanted you to think."